Amanda, or Amanda Hang. I was born and raised in Michigan, and then I lived in Minnesota for about 10 years before I moved to California. So I've been in LA for about 5 years now.
What do you do here in LA?
Here in LA, I work in production, so it's like a variety of things. I'm a producer, I'm a director, but as a freelance person, I AD, which is an assistant director. I also work as a production manager and as a line producer.
So do you have a background in film before you moved to LA?
Yeah, so I actually went to school at AI in Minnesota, and I got my degree there. It wasn't my original choice. I actually went to University of Michigan, back in Michigan, and I was pre-law. So I didn't actually think I was going to go out and do this. And it was just, I all of a sudden had a feeling like I didn't want to do pre-law, or I didn't know. It was just like a liberal arts school or whatever. So I left the University of Michigan, and then I went to Minnesota because I had family there. And then once I was there, I actually helped out on a set, actually a King Bang set, and kind of from there it was kind of came together, and I figured out that's something logistical that I'm good at and also creative. And so it was kind of everything fell into place, and from there, I enrolled into AI, which had a film program. And so I had a little bit of knowledge before I came out here to California.
AI, is it film production, film studies, or what is it?
Yep, I had an emphasis on design management. So it was kind of marketing based, but it was film production, film and TV production.
So since you did you kind of did pre-law, have you ever thought about maybe doing entertainment law?
I thought about it actually, because a lot of what I do, especially in the production aspect of things, is like clearance and copyrights and things like that, and like contracts, a lot of vendor contracts, cast contracts and things like that. You have to know the verbiage. And I actually thought about going into entertainment law, but I don't know, it's too much writing, too much reading. It's just it's a lot denser, it's a lot more, it's easier for me just to give it to the lawyers. But I actually have thought about it, but I'm good.
Yeah, because I think if you do that, you could go the agent route too, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So explain, like, what do you do at your job, like some of the day-to-day stuff?
Basically, I freelance, so I'm not tied to one specific company. It's funny because people always ask me what I do, and I don't think they ever really know what I do. Even when I say, oh, I work on movies or I work on TV shows, they're like, oh, so you shoot it? Not really. There's a lot of things that go on behind the camera, or just the person who's holding the camera. So in the position I am now, a freelancer, I work project to project. So as a project comes up, I'm hired on to basically produce or production manage that particular project. In general, as a production manager, what I'm in charge of is the logistics behind how to produce and create a production. So from the budget, from there, I figure out the cast, the crew, the hiring, the venues, the locations. I secure all those things. I secure the vendors. Make sure that casting is all set and the cast is on. And, so obviously I don't do all of them individually, but I manage that. So then I hire my department as well, like a production coordinator, different things in the office with me as well that can help manage those things. But that's basically what I do. I'm kind of heading all the departments to make sure that everyone has the resources that they need in order to make the production happen.
In that position, who do you report to somebody else to? Mm-hmm.
As a production manager, I usually report to a line producer, and the line producer usually reports to an EIC, and then they to the executive producer. So from the top down, executive producer usually doesn't have. They have creative say, but they're more financial in certain things. But if you've noticed on lots of projects, there's multiple executive producers and they always have different roles. But from there, the different departments goes creative to production. And so from production side, line producers. But it's also different too, because within the industry itself, like line producers sometimes don't appear on feature films, and there's only UPMs, and sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And in reality TV, UPMs don't usually appear, but sometimes they do. So it just, honestly, the titles change a little bit from different genres that you do. But for me specifically, I report to, as a production manager, I report to a line producer, or the line producer, reports to the EIC, which is the executive in charge.
So as a production manager, do they give you like a budget and say, hey, we have to stay within this? Or do you just say, I find these people and you guys deal with it? Or how does that work?
Ideally, so the line producer usually gets the budget. So they get the whole entire budget. And the reason why they're called a line producer is because they're managing the lines of the budget. So that's where line producer comes from. So they basically have budget everything out. They have their assumptions. So for example, if we're shooting a short film, we assume, okay, it's one location, 2 actors, and it's going to be 1 camera, and this is what we're looking to do. So then from those assumptions that we're planning on doing, whether it's day shoot, night shoot, we can then plan, okay, what rentals are, what crews needed, what cast is, so on and so forth. And so we have lines in those budgets. So as a line producer, you're managing the entire budget, and then as a production manager, you do get a budget, but you get your own department, because you have your own production to manage. So you have your own man days for PAs and your own trailers and things like that you need to rent, and equipment and so on and so forth. So usually every department gets their own budget. So the camera department will get some, and then the art department will get their own. And so they'll know what they need to manage within that. But it really depends too on the production, because sometimes depending on who the line producer is, they don't necessarily give those numbers to the department heads either. They just say, hey, stay within this range. And, so it just really depends on how you work it. But as a production manager, yes, I do manage the budget that's given to me by the line producer.
And I guess every project is different too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every project's different, because your assumptions are different, right? Because if you're thinking about 1 location versus 2 locations, that means that's, an extra day, company move, that's vehicles, that's, lots of extra things that you have to consider when you're doing your budget. So yeah, so every time is different. If you're traveling across 6 cities versus staying in 1 city, that, obviously increases the budget as well too.
So how did you get into this position? Just when you moved to LA, how did you start?
I am a producer director, right? So being in Minnesota, you wear a lot of hats, right? So I graduated from school. I worked in public access in the sense of teaching people how to use cameras. And I did a lot of corporate videos and wedding videos, and worked as an independent video producer. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to tell stories like everyone else, right? So I felt like I needed to come to LA, because as much as I was doing what I could do in Minnesota, I felt like that's where I was already at. So I needed to move to LA. Unfortunately, you kind of do, because that's where the hub is, where productions come from here. Even if they're shooting across the country, production companies are based out of LA. So I came out to LA and I had a 5-year plan. I made a plan. I said, in a year, I'm moving out to LA. So I saved as much money as I could in a year. And I made as much contact as I could out in LA or whatever. And so the year came and I packed up everything and I came out to LA. From there, I basically was the first year or 2, I just wanted to work in industry. Didn't matter what it was, where it was. I just needed to immerse myself in the industry here, because it is vastly different than what it is in Minnesota or any other smaller markets, right? Because you wear a lot of hats in Minnesota. You do this and you do that. You know how to run the camera and the audio and produce and, which is great. But also at the same time, when you come here, you realize you don't know half of anything, because people are experts in what they do. There is a department for it for a reason. I knew this and I wanted to just work. It didn't matter what it was. It was commercials, reality, features. First job I had, I took this non-paid PA job and this low budget. It's funny because it's called low budget, but it was still $1 million, right? It was an amazing summer. It was we shot for 3 weeks. And then of course I met a bunch of people from there. They're oh, well, this person, that person, this person. And then you had asked me a question, but I basically PA'd and made my way way and met these people and took every opportunity that came to me just because I wanted to learn. And that's the thing is like being here, you have to want to learn. You can't think that you know everything because you don't. And even me in the position I am now, I'm still learning, and you have to continue to have that mindset that you're always going to be learning something, because there's no cookie cutter formula for production. You're always on your toes. You're always problem solving. Yeah, you take from what you know from the past productions that you've done to make it the best that you are currently on. But there's going to be new things where you're like, I've never dealt with that before. So I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to deal with this, you know?
Talk a little bit about, just from your experience, the difference you see between productions in Minnesota and like here.
So the differences that I've noticed, like working in Minnesota and working here in LA, it's just the scope. It's the scope of the projects, the scope of what we do. And I also think the markets that we work in. So working in Minnesota, I find that you have to work on a smaller scale. So then you oftentimes have to wear many hats. And also because there's not a lot of people who are...
Well, there's not a lot of competition too, right?
Yeah, there's not a lot of competition. So you're not necessarily always pushing yourself, right? To not necessarily being better, but you just stay stagnant or you stay at the same level that you're at. So, but if you're with other people who are creative and are always pushing and challenging, and there's the competition.
I think here, no matter how good you get, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking there's somebody better than me. So I better up my game every time.
Yeah.
And even then, there's still somebody.
Yeah.
When you get to the next level, there's still somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So I think your mentality kind of changed too, right?
The biggest difference that I noticed is I can do what I'm doing for a living here in LA. I don't know if I could do what I'm doing in Minnesota for a living. And I know there are very successful people who work in film and TV in Minnesota that, you know, freelance and do that. But there's this very small number, right? But to have that opportunity to do it here, like it is my day job. Like this is my career, is to do this. And I don't know if a lot of people can see that in Minnesota because it's such a small market.
Now you're a production manager, but in an ideal world, what would you like?
In an ideal world, I want to direct. There's not really a path, unfortunately, to be a director. Everyone's like, oh yeah, well you do this and this and you become a director. And well, no, because it's not as straightforward as like if I want to be a DP. It's very like, okay, well, if you want to be a DP, you become an AC and you know, you become a cam op and then you become a, you know, this or whatever. Like there's a more clear path, right? But to be a director, you don't even have to have an experience in production. You could just be like, I want to direct. And if I have money, I can get this together and I can hire anybody to do the rest of the production stuff. And I just come in and direct the actors.
So do you see what you're doing right now helping your career as a director?
I do. So I think it's beneficial because I feel like a lot of directors come in and they don't really know what it takes to make a movie. And so they get a little blinded about their vision. And that's just the type of director they are. But I think for me, it's been beneficial to be a part of production because then I kind of understand also the producing side of things of like how to secure money for a film, how to secure this and how to work with a network and so on and so forth, and how to also plan and budget a movie, right? So it's only strengthened myself as a director.
You said earlier that you AD sometimes. Can you kind of talk about that? Because I think people that are not in the industry, they hear the word assistant director and they think that you're directing or assistant directing, but go a little into that.
So as an assistant director, basically, it's the other side of being a director. So director is very much creative, right? They're the visionary, they're the big picture, they're the ones looking at, you know, working with the actors specifically to get the emotions and get things and kind of calling the shots in that sense creatively. The assistant director is the logistical side of things. So they break down your story, they take your story, they literally line the script, they look at and say, what are all the components? Where are all the locations? Who are all the people? What are all the props needed? What are the wardrobe that is needed in it? And basically break everything out logistically and organize it. So once you break everything down, you make a schedule and then you run that schedule and you're telling the actors, you're here at this time, you're here at makeup, you're changing wardrobe, you're doing this, you're doing that. And then, you know, getting everything into play for the director, so that when he or she comes onto set, they're able to just have everything go and just focus on the performance and the creativity of it. So yeah, a lot of people think assistant director is literally creatively assisting the director. So they don't want to have assistant directors on their crew because they think that's going to take away from them being a director. Specifically, in the smaller markets that I've worked with, they don't think that ADs are necessary, but ADs are very, very necessary because they help run the set a lot smoother.
Because they pretty much manage the set in a sort of way, right?
Yeah. So I usually AD on features or narrative stuff. And then when I'm working as a production manager, I'm usually working on like commercials or reality TV and things like that. And they kind of mesh together actually from the two, because working in reality TV and commercials, I'm actually the one who's doing the schedules and the one who's contacting all these different things. But yeah, as an assistant director, it's a very important role on set because they're the actual person running the set.
Because I think if a AD is doing their job, I wouldn't say correctly, but smoothly, they kind of take the pressure off the director and the producer on the day-to-day stuff. Right?
Oh, for sure. And if you think about it, so then a director is directing cast. I would say that the AD or assistant director is directing crew, if that makes a clear difference. Because with crew, it's very logistical. It's very like day-to-day, the operational type of thing, versus the director who is focused on the cast is more about the creative, their performance and things like that.
So speaking of crew, talk a little bit about some of the crew that you've noticed in LA that people don't really have in like smaller markets. Usually
here in LA, there's a bigger scope. So in the department specifically itself, right? Let's say camera department, right? So you actually have your DP, and then so Minnesota is usually a DP, and that's it. And maybe one other person, like a PA or something, that's helping with lights. And then maybe if you're lucky, you might have a gaffer, and a swing, you know what I mean? So you might have like 2 or 3 people, but that person who's helping with lights is also running batteries, running tape, and running things like that, right? So that's like maybe 2, 3 people in Minnesota. But here in LA, in a camera department, you easily have, so depending on what you're doing, right? So even within the ACs, they have first AC and second AC. First AC, you're usually pulling focus, right? And then a second AC, you're the one who's usually with the slate, and you're running batteries, and you're making sure that the camera is put together, and so on and so forth, right? And then you also have camera operators, and then you also have a DP, because sometimes people who DP don't actually touch the cameras, or sometimes they do, but it also depends too if you're doing reality or if you're doing even within reality. Are you doing a stage show? Are you doing a live show? Are you doing multi-camera? Are you, so that's what so when you say the difference between crews, it takes a whole bunch, because even within, so for example, if I do multi-camera, so I've worked on a show called Escape the Night, and there's 8 cameras, and then we have a control room. So we also, on top of that, we have a technical supervisor, right? Who's also running all the tech stuff, for all the cameras to all the wireless, all these different things. And within the tech soup is like a tech, assist. And, they also work with the cameras to make sure that the cameras are all working properly, because there could be GoPros, they could be doing this. And so it could massively be a lot larger being here in LA, right? Even the production department, that's the one thing that I find lacking most importantly in Minnesota, is usually you just have your producer and they do everything. Here in production, so when it's funny, because when I say, oh, I work in production, they're like, oh yeah, well, they just assume then you just do all of it. But it's like, no, production is actually its own department, right? So you have your line producer, your production manager, your production coordinator, and then your assistant production coordinators, and you have your office PAs, which are different from your set PAs, because your set PAs work with your ADs, so that in itself is like lots of different roles. And then too, on a feature film, you also have your production secretaries, where are equal to your assistant production coordinators, and you have like all these other different roles. And so, and the thing is, it's all super important. People think, well, what is there to do? Because you think about all the vendor contracts that I talked about, the securing the locations and securing, the vendors. So where are you going to go to the bathroom? What are you going to eat that day? Where are you going to get your tables? Where are you going to get, things like that? Like
where are people going to park?
Yeah, where are people going to park? Do we have directions to this place? And so there's a lot of details that go into it that people forget about so that it can go seamlessly, that you need all these extra people.
I think some people think that certain positions are not important, but every single position is as important as the director's position on a set.
Oh,
right?
For sure. One of my favorite line producers said that basically he has done this budget and he can't physically do it all himself. So he's literally hired all the pieces that he needs to be able to do it. And those are all his extra hands doing the job because he can't have eyes on everything. And then also too with that is if you have a team that are experts in their fields, you trust them. Then you don't have to consume yourself with that. That's the biggest thing is like if you have a team around you that know what they're talking about. So when you say, hey, this is what I want to do, they can say, yeah, that's not going to work. Or it's going to work, but it's going to cost money. Or we can rig it this way, or we can't, And that's the most important thing about having people know what they're doing.
I noticed that, especially, I guess this is more in the Hmong community, but we think that to be in the movie industry, you have to be a director, a producer, or a DP. But there are so many different positions you can do, right?
Oh, yeah.
One of the positions that is very important that we don't talk about a lot is the sound department.
Oh, yeah.
Because as a sound mixer, you are crucial. But people don't really think about that.
Yeah. And I think even now people kind of even in here in LA, I feel like people put them to the side. But when you're watching something, you're also listening to something. It's not a silent movie. So not only are you visually seeing it, you're also hearing it. When you, for example, you have a mic on, right? And you get up and you walk to the door. There's lots of sounds that come up with what you're wearing and how your clothes rubbed against each other as you're getting up off of whether is it a couch, is it a chair, is it squeaky? And then your floor. Is it a creaky floor? Is it a hardwood floor? Is it carpet? All those things can tell you without showing you.
Going back to where you're talking about having people that you trust around you or hiring those people, is that whoever you hire, you have to be able to trust them too, right? Whether they are more experienced or not, because I think if they feel like you trust them, they're more willing to go above and beyond for you too, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and a lot of it is for me, in the position that I am, I have a lot of responsibility in team morale, crew morale. I always want to make sure that my crew is supported and my crew knows that they can come to me, because if they know that they can come to me and they feel supported, they'll do what they can to support me, right? So it's a relationship, it's a two-way street. And so that's exactly that. If you have people that you trust, or get people that you trust with you, so then that way you don't always have to make those hard decisions, and you can also have a collaboration, a true collaboration, right? You don't always have to be the person in control in the sense of yes, no, in the decision making, because you know that they know what's best for that particular, scene or whatever it is. And so I think that's the thing, is really trusting your team.
Yeah, because I noticed too that sometimes you're so busy with everything that when you're doing this other part, your mind is still on over here. So your crew is trying to help you do this part, but because you're over here, if you shut them off, they're not going to help you. And then when you come back, you're like, why isn't it done,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think little things like that, if you trust your crew and you say, hey, work on that, I trust you, because when you're done with this, you come back, that's done properly.
And even as a department head, not even as a director, right? Because even as a DP, you're I want this lit like this. You should trust that the people below you, your gaffer is going to be able to give your direction to the whatever grips and all the other people underneath him to light it the way you need it lit, right? Yeah. And it's about conversation too, because obviously there's a lot of planning ahead of time. So it's not just you go the day of and you're oh, let me to see what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this and that,
Talk more about that pre-production. Like, how important is pre-production?
Pre-production is the most important thing. They say that you make your movie in pre-production. Like you actually are making it in pre-production. You're making the decisions, you're making the budget, you're hiring the people, you're talking about it, you're doing things, and you're only executing it in production, right? So as a production manager, I'm usually on way before everybody else, because I have to get the creative from everybody, from the higher ups and like the budget, and then figuring out, okay, from here, what do we need to do? So then on the day, like you were talking about before, like on the day, it just works, right? Like it just goes, because you've already planned and made all these decisions and you put these things all in place. And so then, you've secured all the things and timed everything out. So then when things happen on the day, you can react to the problems that come up versus having to plan during it, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Because I feel like
things will always change, and problems will always arise. Mm-hmm. But if you're prepped for the whole day, at least hey, we need to get to here, right?
Yeah, that's the most important thing, is that if you plan as much as you can, you're always going to have problems. Something's always going to happen. Nothing's going to go exactly 100% that you plan, but you're better prepared to make those decisions when they come in a more efficient and timely manner, right? Because if you don't, then you have to do research, you have to figure this out, and then you're also then wasting everyone else's time trying to figure out what to do. And of course, worst case scenario, things happen, and you can't avoid. But as much as you can avoid, the things that you can control, you should plan and have those things figured out.
What are some of the things that you kind of prep for when you do pre-production?
So for pre-production, the main thing is you have to know the creative, right? You have to have your assumptions in this. So how many locations? How many actors are you working with? How many cameras are you working with? What cameras are you working with? And then from there, you're able to build your budget out and know what you're able to afford with what you're given, right? A lot of times budgets are already kind of made to kind of bid for things, and then that's how you get your money. But so that's kind of like the before, but once you get onto a project, then okay, I have this much money allocated to this department, right? So then that means I can then start looking for rentals, right? Or does my crew, so for example, camera, just because you're in the camera, who am I going to hire as a DP, right? And usually when you hire that DP, they usually take care of the rest of their crew because they have people they like to work with, so on and so forth. But if not, you can hire those people. But you hire a department head, but then from there, have they worked with a director before? Have they not? What kind of look does the director want that the DP is working with? So that means what kind of camera are they using? What's the deliverable? Are we shooting in 4K? Are we shooting in 1080? Are we, is it going to go online? Is it going to be a feature? Is it a 3D film? So on and so forth. And a lot of those decisions that are being made, you have to source it. Right? So that's why when I said before, you actually are making the film in pre-production because you're sourcing all the things that you want. So the camera, you source that. You find the vendor, you get the rental, you get all that. The equipment that you need, the lighting that you need. Even within just production, like the catering, how are you going to feed everybody that day? Is it inside? Is it outside? Your location is the biggest thing too. Is it an outdoor location, indoor location? Is it the one location the whole entire time? And within that shoot, am I only using the living room, but do I have the rest of the house to use, right? So then from there, where is parking? Where is, bathrooms? Where is the electric box, right? So if something goes out, like, do we have enough power in the house to power all the lights? Do we need to get a generator? And if we need a generator, do we need permits? So there's all these little details that happen because there's jurisdictions that you have to abide by. There's people that live, and that's the thing too. Are you going to be in the park? So all those decisions that you need to be made are being made in production or in pre-production, right? So you have to source it, you have to secure it, and then that way, when the time comes, the day comes, The bathrooms are going to arrive. The trailers are going to arrive. You have security on set if you need it. All the crew is going to come onto set because they had a call sheet. You know, all these things you have to plan in pre-production in order for people to know what to do on the day.
How long is it expected for pre-production?
So if you are able to go straight, I'd say like 6 weeks. This is not writing, but this is also after casting too, because casting is even before the pre-production.
I'm sure it depends on the genre too, like do you need stunt, all of this too.
Exactly. Because you work on a weekly basis when you're in pre-production, right? Versus like in production, you tend to think you work in a daily, and then in post, you think you work hourly, right? So, typically, I feel like 6 weeks is if you have everything's greenlit and everything's a go, and you've got ready to, I would say 6 weeks is a solid time for you to hire folks, get your vendors, get your quotes, get things solidified, so on and so forth. But obviously, like, locations could also take months prior to. So it's hard. So it's like 6 weeks to 6 months, because you also want to say, especially with the feature, right? Like, you could be scouting and you can't really start until you know what location you're at.
Talk a little bit about locations, because I think that's something that I feel like some people don't really understand. Because let's say, for example, your short film is a friend drives from his house to visit his girlfriend or whatever. So inside the car is a location. If they stop and they look at this building, that's another location.
Exactly. And even within a house, it's a different location. Because if you're in a kitchen versus here being living room is a different location. So when you're looking at your script, right, you want to, anytime it says interior, exterior, anytime there's like a break in your script that says like interior, night, living room, and then whatever happens, your dialogue, and then that person goes to the kitchen, so on and so forth. So once you have identified, this is also why you bring on your AD, so that way they can break down like what do we all need in all of this, right? Because they kind of work in pre-pro in that sense of breaking down the script and figuring out how much or what's needed.
So with the experience that you have now, do you have any advice for people, not necessarily moving to LA, but just getting started in the business, especially like small town Minnesota or Michigan?
Yeah. Honestly, I just do it. Like, in the sense of like, your hands dirty, be a part of it, be open-minded, be willing to learn. Even if you know what you're doing, you've been doing it for a long time, you can always learn from somebody else, right? So you can always go on to another set. I think it's the more sets that you're on, the more experience you gain and the more knowledge that you have. And so that's probably the most priceless advice I could give is just go help people. Even if you're like a day, like, hey, I have a free day. Do you need help? Go on their sets, see how it runs. Because not only that, like, you can see, unfortunately, sometimes like how a bad set is run, like, that's not what I want to do. That's not how I want to run it. I want to make sure I have these things in play when I'm doing my thing. Or, you're going to meet somebody on the crew who also is going to be beneficial to you down the road. So I think it's just doing it.
If somebody wants to move to LA, do you have any?
No, don't do it. My rent is too high. People need to stop moving here so they freeze our rent. No, I think I said it earlier too, is if you want to move out to LA, do it. You're never going to have enough money. You're never going to have enough whatever it is. And that's for any place. If you want to move to New York or Chicago, any other bigger city, make a plan to do it and stick to it. You have people here in LA, Hmong people, if you want to come out, you have a community here. There's actually quite a few of us out here, more than I thought there would be. And we actually get together a lot. Sometimes. I mean, more than I thought we would. I guess for me, I want people to know that you can do it. If you really want to do it, and you just understand it's hard work, but you can do it. and you can make a job out of it, and you can tell people all the cool things that you get to do, or not.
Is there anything you miss being here?
Oh my God, I miss Neva. I know Fresno is like a few hours away, but it's not the same. Partly it's because being in Minnesota, I took it for granted, having a lot of, Hmong businesses and things like that. I miss my family, of course, but with technology, it's like you don't miss a beat sometimes because you're always talking with them every day. I miss lakes. Like, I know I have the ocean, but I miss like lakes.
Do you miss the seasons?
I do miss the seasons. I miss the seasons. I miss the lakes.
I don't know if it's because we're more busy here, but I noticed that when I was in Minnesota, I did more outdoor activities.
Oh, yeah. Totally. I fish all the time, right? I go fish all the time, go biking all the time, and I don't know if it's because there's more trails in Minnesota or if there's just more access to things, but here I'm like, I don't want to go out. Like, I don't know if I'm tired, or I don't know if it's because, the traffic and the parking and it's far and there's not a lot of like places to go. I don't know.
Do you visit your family often then?
I do. I actually, because I'm the only one out, everyone else is in Minnesota basically, and I have one sister in Michigan still, but basically then I by default, if I want to see them, I have to go back to see them. If I don't go, then they might have visited me like a couple times here and there. So I do try to go back every year during Christmas because that's the only time I have time.
Are you the only person in your family that's into the arts, or?
Yes, I am the youngest of 5 kids, and I am the outlier. I'm not going to say black sheep, but I'm definitely the one who took her time in college and the one who decided to do this. Everyone else is very like mom, HR, works at the university, probation officer, like very like normal jobs. And I'm the one who's like, I'm going to be artsy and I'm going to go do this. And I'm going to move to LA. So yeah, yeah, I'm the only one. And so that's why I think now my parents still kind of don't understand, but at least they're coming to and I think that's also the reason why I got away with a lot of things that I was doing, because a lot of times, Asian parents, Hmong parents are like doctor, lawyer, blah, blah, blah. My parents actually came over earlier. They were in the 76. That's when they came over. So they're a little bit more progressive in that sense of like not necessarily putting the pressures. They did stress higher education. And so that's the one thing was that, do I recommend you going to school for film and TV? No. But I did need to get a bachelor's degree to satisfy my parents. So that's part of the reason why I went to school, so that I could get a bachelor's degree to be like, here you go, Mom and Dad. And also, it helps in this day and age to have a bachelor's degree. It helps you weed out. Was it beneficial? Yes. Was it worth the money? I don't know. Because a lot of the things that you learn, you actually learn on set. I mean, you learn film theory, there's a lot of advantages to going to film school, but I don't know. Sometimes
you don't even look at people's resume, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a degree or...
Yeah. Or if you're looking at the resume, it's vastly different from like regular resume, right? Because I used to work in HR too. And it was like, you have all these different things and what you're looking for. But in a production resume, it's your credits. It's like sometimes you look at one sheet and they just have the name of it, the year of it, what network it was. And it's just like the list of credits. And because you want to know what they did or what they worked on or what kind of experience that they have versus you don't care what school they went to. Half the people, probably, more than half the people actually haven't even gone to film school. There are some people who have,
Well, even if they have, sometimes that's not even on their resume.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter.
No, I don't even think when I look at resumes, most of the time people don't have their schooling on there.
I've seen the benefits and actually the bad thing about film school, because I've talked to directors where they're like, oh, you know what? This director did this, I want to do this. And you read the script, your script, it doesn't fit. Your story doesn't fit that at all. like, it's really cool what this director did, but it just doesn't fit. Because as a DP, I think right now we're going through an anamorphic phase where everybody wants to shoot anamorphic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but your story is better. Like, even 4:3, you know?
Yeah.
That widescreen, you have so many empty space that you're not telling your story correctly.
Exactly.
So I think sometimes the school does help, but sometimes people misunderstand it or they learn something like, I want to do this, and then it just doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think also too, sometimes people go into school and then they come out and they think that they know a lot more, you know, and it's like, it's a very theory based, I feel like, you know, like AI, I know that they had talked about, being more hands-on in the field. And of course, like, we got to shoot and we got to make stuff and, you know, learn E&G and make our own films and things like that. So it was more hands-on. But because being in Minnesota, you know, I didn't really work in the field with a lot of people. I mean, I was definitely lucky to have met one of my mentors in there because she's, you know, been a filmmaker for many years. And so she kind of took me under her wing. And so I was able to learn a lot more from her outside of school than from her, just working with her in her organization. But yeah, I feel like with schooling, you get stuck on certain theories. But the thing about storytelling is that there's no one way to tell something. Yeah, there's ways to tell it better, but no one can tell you how to tell your own story or whatever story you want to tell. Of course, yeah, there's like ways to heighten it, to make it better, to make it worse. But in order to keep pushing film and TV and things like that, you have to think outside the box. And, you know, if you think about all these old like filmmakers, like no one had ever done those different angles before, but those angles help tell the story. And so we, with our technology that we have, we should be able to continue to push the envelope and tell our story. And I think as long as you go to school and you, once again, have an open mind and understand and respect what has been done in the past, and then take that and try to move forward, you know, yeah. I mean, there's definitely benefits of going to school, but is it necessary? Yeah, I mean, someone else may have a different opinion. But like I said, I mean, having a degree is great, you know, because if I ever decide to go back into the regular workforce, I have a bachelor's degree. So, you know, like that'll weed me out from, you know, a lot of other things. But I don't know. It's just...
Well, no, I think that's the thing about this industry is that everybody has different experience, even if they end up in the same position or same project, everybody's journey is different.
Oh, definitely. There's tips and tricks and things to help you keep in mind, but you have to just be very organic and adaptable and just make your way through and have a certain resilience to making sure you to keep determined and to keep going and to see what you want.
So in closing, do you have any more advice or anything?
No, I mean, I think it's great that, you know, thank you for interviewing me. I think it's great what you're trying to do, highlighting all the Hmong people here, and just, it's awesome. And so thank you.